Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. A faint buzzing filled Ambrose's ears as he stood outside Lawson Ellington's office. His heart pounded so hard he could almost hear it echo in the deserted hallway. Overhead, the fluorescent lights flickered in a half-second stutter, casting a cold glow against the beige walls. It was almost quitting time, and most employees had headed home, or so he assumed. But the distant sound of Aveline's laugh tugged at his gut like a warning siren. He swallowed, trying to shake off the heavy feeling in his chest. "Calm down, Ambrose," he told himself. "It's probably nothing." Yet every fiber of his being insisted something was off. He glanced down at his phone. 2 missed calls from Aveline earlier in the day, no voice messages. She'd texted him only once, something about working late. Now, apparently, she was with Lawson. Ambrose gently tested the doorknob. Locked. A wave of heat flooded his cheeks. "This is crazy," he thought. "I shouldn't be snooping like some jealous fool." But an overpowering sense of dread made him rap on the door once, twice, no answer. Then, from behind the frosted glass, there was movement. Aveline's laughter died away, replaced by a muffled gasp. That was enough. With a single sharp twist, Ambrose turned the knob harder. Surprisingly, it gave way. The door swung open, and the world seemed to lurch. Inside, Aveline stood with a silk scarf barely clinging to her body, her hair tousled as though she'd hurriedly tried to fix it. Lawson, tall and broad-shouldered, was fumbling with the last button on his collar, clearly caught mid-act. The room itself reeked of expensive cologne and tension. Everything else, Ambrose's entire life, collapsed into static noise in his head. For a second, no one spoke. They all just stared at each other, like a grim painting come to life. Aveline's cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide. Lawson's expression flickered between shock and annoyance, like he was angry at being interrupted. Ambrose felt words clawing at his throat, but fury rose faster. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice sounded raw, even to his own ears. Aveline lurched into motion first. She gripped the scarf tighter around her torso, her face twisted in a tangle of guilt and defiance. "Ambrose, listen, I can explain." "Explain?" Ambrose let out a harsh laugh, stepping forward. "You think I'm blind? Or stupid?" His knuckles turned white as he curled his fists by his sides. Lawson cleared his throat, attempting to regain composure. "Ambrose," he said in that low, steady voice that always used to command respect, "this isn't what it looks like. Now step outside, let's—" "Shut up," Ambrose snarled, surprising even himself. Weeks no. Months of suspicion, late nights, unanswered questions. Everything roared inside him. He took one more step and Lawson braced as if preparing for a fight. Behind them, commotion in the hallway. Curious employees, perhaps a security guard, began gathering at the threshold. Whispers rose like a swirl of cold wind. "Is that Ambrose?" "What's going on?" Aveline's eyes darted to the crowd, her voice trembling. "Baby, please just let me talk. It wasn't supposed to what?" Ambrose shot back, bitterness coating every syllable. "You said you had a late meeting." He gestured around the office, chaos in his stare. "This is the meeting you meant?" She opened her mouth, but no words formed, just a helpless shrug. Then Lawson made the mistake of stepping closer. "You need to calm down," he told Ambrose, as though he were disciplining a junior employee. "Let's sort this out quietly." Something inside Ambrose snapped. Before he even realized it, he lunged at Lawson. For a heartbeat, he felt the surge of raw adrenaline pulsing through his veins. The room blurred, and only Lawson's arrogant face was in focus. Aveline gasped, "Stop!" She reached out, her scarf slipping, causing an even bigger stir from the onlookers. But she managed to tug Ambrose's shoulder, halting him for just a moment long enough for him to regain a flicker of control. He pulled away, exhaling heavily. His fury was overshadowed by a stark heartbreak that twisted like a knife in his gut. He glanced at Aveline, her face etched with a mixture of fear and something else he couldn't quite read. Betrayal? Guilt? Outside, the murmur of onlookers intensified. Phones were out, capturing the drama. Ambrose felt the walls closing in. He turned sharply, pushing past the small crowd. Each step felt like it had bricks tied to it. His mind was a tornado of pain and humiliation. Ambrose! Aveline's voice rang out behind him, desperate, but he didn't stop. He barreled through the corridor, the stale office air choking him more with every stride. In the elevator, he felt the weight of his wedding band pressing into his skin. The door slid shut. The mirror reflected a man he almost didn't recognize, eyes red, jaw clenched, tears threatening to spill. Slowly, he slipped the ring off, clenching it in his fist so tightly it might cut into his palm. When the elevator reached the lobby, Ambrose bolted straight for the parking lot. His car was there, waiting under the dull streetlight. He yanked the door open and sank into the driver's seat. The ring, still in his hand, felt heavier than lead. His phone buzzed, Aveline calling, her picture flashing on the screen. He let it ring until it went silent. Then again, and again. Finally, he switched the phone off. The last thing he heard was the faint echo of her voice in his memory, the sweet laugh that once belonged to his Aveline. Now it belonged to Lawson Ellington, or who the hell else knew. As he gripped the steering wheel, a single thought ricocheted in his mind. Is this the end of everything, or the start of something I never imagined? He took a trembling breath. Then he turned the key and sped off into the night. The city lights blurred as Ambrose drove aimlessly through the neon haze. His phone lay silent on the passenger seat, powered off, effectively muting all the frantic calls he suspected were still coming in. He needed quiet. He needed space to think. But memories had a stubborn way of intruding. They came in flashes. Aveline's radiant smile on their wedding day, the faint smell of lilacs in her hair, the way she would softly hum a tune whenever she felt shy. He remembered how, a few years back, he was just a tech-savvy engineer, stepping into Ellington Defense for a new job opportunity. Lawson had appeared like a seasoned mentor, a former Marine turned corporate leader, an imposing figure that Ambrose once respected. What a joke, Ambrose thought bitterly, flicking on the radio just to have background noise. Some pop song played, but he barely heard it. Instead, his mind rewound further, revealing that first moment he met Aveline. They'd bumped into each other quite literally in an Ellington Defense hallway. She was juggling a stack of files wearing a pencil skirt and that contagious grin. He was lugging around a box of tools fresh from the R&D lab. Their collision sent paperwork flying everywhere. A string of apologies and a shared laugh later, he found himself drawn to her bright eyes and gentle aura. They exchanged numbers that same afternoon. It was sweet, uncomplicated like all good beginnings. But as the months turned into years, ambition seeped into every corner of that once harmonious life. Aveline soared to a personal assistant role for Lawson himself, the big boss, employees like to whisper. Ambrose, meanwhile, earned a promotion to senior engineer, focusing on specialized weapons tech. They began living in an upscale apartment, traveling on weekends, chatting about future kids. Everything seemed perfect. Until it didn't. Aveline's late nights, the occasional whiff of cologne on her blazer that didn't belong to Ambrose, canceled dates, last-minute business trips. He had tried brushing off the uneasy feeling coiling in his gut. They had arguments, of course, but he never could bring himself to believe she was truly capable of betraying him. "Idiot," he muttered under his breath, gripping the wheel. The city's skyline glowed on the horizon. In the flickering reflection of a passing billboard, he caught sight of his own eyes, haunted, furious, and heartbreakingly lost. He pulled into a quiet lot behind a closed coffee shop. The street lamps cast a dim, flickering glow on puddles left by an earlier rain. Turning off the engine, Ambrose leaned his head back against the seat, inhaling the stale car air. For a moment, he considered smashing the wedding ring, throwing it out the window, or maybe burying it somewhere he'd never see it again. Yet he couldn't bring himself to do any of those things. His mind drifted to Lawson's image, a commanding presence with a reputation for workplace flings, though rarely confirmed. Ambrose had once admired him, considered him a role model. He'd confided in Lawson about personal aspirations, even about Aveline's career ambitions. Now the thought made him sick. Eventually, with hours slipping by, he restarted the car. If nothing else, he needed to face Aveline. They had a home to sort through, a marriage that was either in pieces or beyond saving. No matter how much it hurt, He had to see her again if only to hear the truth from her lips. As he turned onto the highway, the city stretched out before him like an endless puzzle of lights. Ambrose felt a wrenching sense that the puzzle of his life had been shattered, the pieces scattered somewhere behind him in Ellington Defense's hallways. Whether he could collect them or would even want to was another question entirely. He pressed the accelerator, heading toward the apartment that, until a few hours ago, he had thought was a safe haven of love. Now, the only thing he felt was dread sinking into his chest. In the quiet hush of the drive, he whispered to himself, "I have to know why." And with that single resolution, however fragile, Ambrose set his course for home, determined to confront Aveline and the ugly truth waiting there. Aveline was sitting on the living room couch when Ambrose arrived. She wore a loose sweater, hair damp, perhaps she'd showered, perhaps trying to wash away her guilt. The overhead lamp illuminated her pale face, making her look almost ghost-like. He shut the door behind him, the echo filling the cramped silence. The apartment was neat, yet the tension in the air weighed 1,000 pounds. Ambrose noticed that the coffee table had been cleared away as though she needed room to pace. A single water glass sat on a coaster, half full. She stood as he approached, fear flickering in her eyes. "Ambrose," she began, voice trembling. Don't." He gestured for her to stay back. Closing his eyes briefly, he inhaled. Emotions churned inside him like a storm, ready to break. "I need to hear it straight. Everything." She swallowed hard, looking at him in a way that begged for mercy. "I made a mistake. It just happened. We were working late and I don't know. I was drawn to Lawson's presence." His chest tightened. "Presence," he repeated, bitterness creeping in. "You mean his big paycheck? His fancy suits? Or that ex-Marine swagger?" Aveline's lips trembled. "It wasn't about that. At first it was just the thrill, like I was stuck in a routine, and he seemed powerful. Charismatic." Ambrose let out a short laugh, almost a bark. "Yeah, charismatic. Sure." Her voice cracked. "I never intended it to go this far." "This far?" He slammed his hand against the wall, causing a framed photo of them at the beach to rattle. "You're sleeping with my boss in his office, half-dressed, and you call it this far?" Rage threatened to consume him whole. He could still see Lawson's smug face, the unbuttoned collar. Aveline's eyes brimmed with tears. "I know I'm wrong. I'm so sorry, Ambrose. I wish—" He cut her off. "What about us? We were planning a future. You said you wanted kids, that we'd buy a house near the lake." His anger cracked, revealing the heartbreak underneath. Was all of that a lie? She shook her head vigorously. "No, it wasn't. She paused, collecting herself. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." Ambrose froze. The room spun. Pregnant. The word echoed like a gunshot. A flicker of hope sparked, then died as quickly as it appeared. He saw the truth in her haunted expression. His voice came out strangled. "Is it mine?" She covered her face with her hands. "I'm not sure." Disbelief and rage converged, fueling the urge to smash something. Anything. How? His mind screamed. How did it end up like this? He grabbed a decorative vase on the shelf just for a second before smashing it down on the carpet. It shattered with a dull thud. Aveline recoiled. "Ambrose, please!" He turned, eyes blazing, fists clenched. For a split moment, the black wave of fury threatened to push him to do something irreversible. The image of Lawson's face flashed again, fueling the hate. But an internal voice, a faint one, yet still present, screamed at him to stop. Don't become a monster because of their betrayal. He stared at her, breathing raggedly. After what felt like an eternity, he stepped back, voice trembling. I'm not a killer." Tears streamed down Aveline's cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you, I just—" "Save it," Ambrose said, cutting her short. His tone was calm now in a chilling way. He felt numb, devoid of the life that once filled him. "I can't do this." Grabbing his jacket off the chair, he glanced at her one last time. "Whatever you two have going on, keep it. I'm done." She reached out, voice cracking. "Ambrose, don't go, please. We can figure this out, maybe do a paternity test." He shook his head. "I've seen enough." And with that, he walked out. Moments later, he was in his car again, the city night cloaking him in endless darkness. The ring he once cherished was still in his pocket. Aveline's sobs echoed in his ears, yet his own eyes stayed dry. It felt like something inside him had simply broken beyond repair. As he slammed the door and started the engine, a single thought pulsed in his mind. There's nothing left for me here. Gunning the accelerator, he sped away from the only home he'd known with her now, just a hollow space filled with shattered promises. A gray dawn light crept over the skyline as Ambrose pulled into a run-down parking garage. He hadn't slept, just driven around, letting the city's empty streets keep him company. Now, as morning approached, exhaustion wore him thin, yet the anger in his chest still churned, refusing to fade. He sat in the driver's seat, staring at the ring in his hand. Flecks of dust clung to it, glinting in the faint early light. Marriage, he thought bitterly. What a sick joke. He squeezed his eyes shut, remembering the good times, vacations at the beach, cozy movie nights, her laughter on Sunday mornings, all overshadowed now by that one moment in Lawson's office. An insistent buzzing startled him. He realized he'd turned his phone back on at some point. The screen glowed with text messages, missed calls, some from Aveline, some from unknown numbers, a couple from friends. He scrolled without reading until one message caught his eye. Law firm. Notification of divorce filings. Respond within 30 days. His lips tightened. So soon. She moved that fast? Or had she lawyered up to protect herself from his anger? Either way, the word divorce glared at him. Instead of terror, he felt a strange relief. Perhaps it was the final severing he needed. He fired up the car and headed to a small diner he knew was open early. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A bored waitress with a name tag reading Becky poured him coffee. He stared at the swirling steam, mind awash with conflicting emotions, betrayal, heartbreak, and a weird sense of liberation. Just as he took a sip, an unfamiliar male voice spoke up. "Rough morning, huh?" Ambrose turned to see a man in a worn leather jacket sliding into the booth across from him. The stranger set down his own mug, eyes scanning Ambrose's face. "No offense, buddy, but you look like you've been run over by a freight train." Ambrose's first instinct was to tell him to back off, but something in the man's gaze was oddly direct, not unkind. "Yeah, well," Ambrose muttered, "not the best night of my life." "Name's Ronan," the man offered, sipping his coffee. "You don't know me, but I kind of recognized you from your days at Ellington Defense, right? You're Ambrose?" Ambrose's stomach tightened. "Used to be. Not anymore." He wondered how this guy knew him. Another co-worker? Some contractor? Ronan shrugged. "I do some, freelance gigs. Heard about your background in engineering, and I also know you served in the Army Reserve for a bit. Word travels fast in certain circles." Ambrose's eyes narrowed. "So what if I did?" He wasn't in the mood for small talk, let alone mysterious hints. "Relax," Ronan said, hands raised in mock surrender. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to offer an opportunity, something that pays well if you got the guts and the skills." Ambrose snorted. "Guts, sure. Skills, maybe. But I'm not looking for a job." "Really?" Ronan's gaze flicked to the wedding ring on the table, then back to Ambrose's tired eyes. "No offense, but you look like someone who just might be open to an escape. A chance to start fresh." Ambrose's jaw clenched. He took another swig of coffee. The bitterness tasted almost comforting. "I don't even know what that means." Ronan slid a small business card across the table, plain white, just a phone number. No name, no logo. "Call if you change your mind. We do private security overseas. Dangerous work, big payoff. You'd be working with professionals, not amateurs." Ambrose eyed the card warily. The idea of skipping town, of leaving everything behind, gnawed at him. He could taste the possibility of freedom from the humiliation that now stained his life. Becky came by, refilling their cups. Ronan stood up, leaving a tip. "I'll be around," he said quietly. "Things fall apart. Sometimes that's when you discover what you're really made of." With that, he left, the door jingling behind him. Alone again, Ambrose stared at the business card. Then he placed it beside his ring, each object representing two diverging paths. One led to the messy, painful process of divorce, courts, and heartbreak. The other hinted at something unknown and possibly dangerous, but undeniably tempting. He let out a slow breath. There's nothing left for me here. Tucking the card into his wallet, Ambrose closed his eyes for a brief second. The sun was rising outside. A new day, he thought grimly, and maybe a new life I never planned for. The diner where Ambrose last met Ronan had a neon sign that still flickered in the early morning haze. The aroma of fried eggs and cheap coffee filled the air, though Ambrose barely noticed. His mind was locked on the small, nondescript card Ronan had given him a single phone number. He'd stared at it for days, replaying every humiliation from his recent past. Losing Aveline, losing his job, losing his sense of self. Finally, he'd dialed. Now, a few days later, he sat across from Ronan once again, both men nursing steaming mugs of black coffee. Outside, a slight drizzle made the windows fog over. "So," Ronan said, leaning forward, "you made your decision?" Ambrose exhaled, tension swirling in his chest. "Yeah," he replied, voice subdued. "I did. I can't stay here. Everything reminds me of what I've lost." He tapped his fingers on the table. "So, if you're still offering, I'm in." A slow grin tugged at Ronan's lips. "Good. There's a private security operation in the Middle East that needs fresh recruits, people with solid firearms training and mechanical know-how. You fit the bill." Ambrose felt a pang of unease. "Private security, huh?" Ronan shrugged. "That's the polite term. Some call it mercenary work." His eyes held a flicker of candor. "Look, I won't sugarcoat it. The job's risky. But the pay is enough to keep you off your old boss's payroll for the rest of your life if you're careful." Ambrose braced himself for that last word. Mercenary. Just a week ago, it would have turned his stomach. Now, it felt like a potential lifeline. "So what's next?" Ronan took a sip of coffee, then slid a thick manila folder across the table. "First, a medical check and a bunch of paperwork. Then a couple days at our training site, a sort of orientation. After that, we fly you out." "Where exactly?" "D Province, near the coast," Ronan answered vaguely. "You'll see a lot of sun, sand, and trouble, but trust me, there's no shortage of opportunity." Ambrose opened the folder, scanning forms that asked bizarrely specific questions. Prior combat experience, mechanical certifications, even psychological screening. "Does this all happen here in the city?" he asked. Ronan nodded. "We got a discreet facility on the outskirts. Let's wrap up and head there. You good with that?" Ambrose hesitated only a moment before nodding. He placed enough cash on the table to cover both coffees plus a generous tip, then stood up. Outside, the drizzle had eased, leaving the sky overcast, a fitting mirror for his uncertain mood. The training site looked more like a converted warehouse surrounded by chain-link fencing. A lone security guard waved them through, directing Ambrose and Ronan into a large, open space inside. Stacks of wooden crates lined the walls, each labeled with cryptic codes. At the far end, a makeshift shooting range gleamed under fluorescent lights. A tall, broad-shouldered woman in tactical pants approached. She had a tight black ponytail and a stern expression. "This him?" she asked Ronan, then turned her gaze on Ambrose. "Name's Harper. I handle initial screenings." Ambrose offered a curt nod. "Ambrose?" She studied him with a quick once-over. "We'll start with the basics. Blood pressure, reflex tests, that kind of thing. Then firearms." She jerked her head toward a nearby door. "Medical bays this way." Ambrose followed, trying not to look too out of place. Another man in scrubs, presumably a medic, checked his vital signs, did a quick blood draw, and ran him through a hearing test. The stark reality of what he was doing sank in with each step. This wasn't some weekend gig, this was the threshold to a whole new life. After an hour of tests, Harper led him to the firing range. She handed him a standard-issue assault rifle. "Let's see if you can shoot straight." Ambrose squared his stance, recalling training from his short stint in the Army Reserve. He inhaled, steadied the weapon, and squeezed off 3 rounds. The muzzle flash cut the dim air, and each bullet struck the paper target with satisfying precision. Harper arched a brow, half impressed. "Not bad." She swapped the rifle for a sidearm. "Now pistol." He repeated the process. Calm breath, focus, fire. His grouping was decent, a tight cluster in the target's center mass. That old muscle memory wasn't gone after all. He glanced at Ronan, who stood at a distance with arms folded, offering a small nod of approval. The final phase involved a quick test of his mechanical know-how. Harper guided him to a half-disassembled Humvee engine. Fix the jam in the fuel line, then check the electrical system. 10 minutes tops. Ambrose cracked his knuckles, diving into the complex maze of hoses and wires. Every part looked scorched with desert dust, but piece by piece he sorted it out, diagnosing a worn seal ring and a faulty ignition coil. Within 9 minutes, the engine coughed back to life. Harper wiped her hands on a rag, glancing at the watch. "All right, you pass. Let's go finalize your contract." He breathed an odd blend of relief and apprehension. This is real, he thought. They wrapped up in a small office, where a burly, middle-aged man scrawled Ambrose's name on a contract that spelled out the mission: protect an outpost and perform vehicle maintenance under hostile conditions. The pay figures made Ambrose's heart jump, enough to start fresh, enough to bury the ghosts of his past. Ronan clapped him on the shoulder. "You leave for the Middle East in 48 hours. Pack light." Standing there under the flickering overhead light, Ambrose felt the weight of the folder in his hand. He swallowed hard, memories of Aveline's betrayal still stinging like an open wound. But now, maybe he could outrun that pain at least for a while. He nodded resolutely. "I'm ready." 48 hours later, Ambrose found himself stepping off a rattling military-grade plane onto a sun-scorched tarmac. The Middle Eastern heat slammed into him like an open furnace door. He squinted against the glare, adjusting the strap of his duffel bag. Around him, heavily armed men shuffled and barked instructions, none of them in English. Ronan emerged from the cargo bay, wiping sweat from his brow. "Welcome to your new home," he said with dry humor. He pointed to a dusty Humvee. "We're heading to Black Claw Outpost, about 2 hours east." Ambrose hopped into the back seat with 2 other new recruits. One introduced himself as Salazar, a quiet Venezuelan ex-soldier. The other was Travis, a chatty Texan who kept fidgeting with his rifle. As the Humvee roared down a cracked highway flanked by barren desert, Ambrose took in the bleak scenery. Bombed-out buildings and twisted metal suggested this region had seen years of conflict. Occasionally, they'd pass a local farmer guiding scrawny goats across the sand, eyes wary of the armed convoy. Eventually, the vehicle convoy arrived at Black Claw Outpost, a haphazard cluster of concrete barriers, sandbag walls, and a single fortified watchtower. The scorching sun bleached everything to a dull beige. Soldiers wearing mismatched uniforms and carrying outdated weapons milled about. Some eyed Ambrose and the newcomers with blatant curiosity, as if sizing up the fresh meat. An imposing figure named Becker, an American in a sweat-stained baseball cap, strode up. "Ronan," he greeted. "This the fresh batch?" Ronan nodded. "Meet Ambrose, Salazar, and Travis. They'll help reinforce your crew." "Ambrose, here's your mechanics, lash rifleman." Becker extended a gloved hand to Ambrose. "Thanks for volunteering, pal. You'll see this isn't exactly the Ritz, but we do the best we can. Word is the local militias have been building up, so watch yourselves." The sun dipped lower on the horizon by the time they'd settled in. Ambrose stowed his gear in a cramped bunkhouse. A single overhead fan sputtered, pushing hot air in circles. "So this is it," he mused, "my new life." He tried not to think about the final night he left home, or the divorce papers that still sat unsigned in his apartment. Just after midnight, alarms blared. Ambrose jolted upright from a half-doze. Becker's voice crackled over a makeshift PA system. "Incoming hostiles at the north gate! All units to defensive positions!" He scrambled to yank on boots and grab his rifle. Outside, searchlights cut through swirling dust. Shouts and gunfire erupted in a chaotic symphony. Travis rushed past, muttering curses under his breath. Ambrose followed him toward the northern barrier, adrenaline surging in his veins. At the gate, muzzle flashes flickered like angry fireflies in the dark. A handful of rebel fighters advanced with battered pickups mounted with machine guns. The outpost's defenders returned fire, bullets sparking off concrete. Ambrose took cover behind sandbags, heart hammering. He inhaled and steadied his rifle, scanning for a target. Crack! Crack! He fired back, each shot fueling an odd mixture of fear and razor-sharp focus. To his left, Salazar let off controlled bursts, forcing the attackers to duck. On the outpost's watchtower, a bigger, .50 cal gun roared, shaking the night with its thunderous recoil. But a panicked shout near the vehicle bay broke Ambrose's concentration. One of the outpost's Humvees had stalled mid-attempt to reposition a perfect target for the militia's machine gun fire. Ambrose's instincts kicked in. "Cover me!" he yelled at Travis and dashed toward the disabled Humvee. Bullets pinged off the ground, sending shards of cement flying. He reached the vehicle, wrenched open the hood, and spotted the problem. A severed fuel line, leaking precious diesel. Rapidly, he clamped it off with a makeshift rubber patch from his own kit. Engine sputter turned into a cough, then roared to life. "Go! Go!" he shouted to the driver, who reversed the Humvee behind protective barriers. The militia fired wildly but missed their prime target. Within seconds, the outpost defenders regained the upper hand, forcing the rebels to retreat in a cloud of dust and gunsmoke. Ambrose collapsed against a sandbag wall, lungs burning from the thick smell of gunpowder. His hands shook, the echo of gunfire ringing in his ears. "I actually survived that," he thought, chest still pounding. Becker's voice cut through the haze. "Nice job out there, newbies. We've secured the area." Around him, the night settled into an uneasy calm. A handful of wounded needed care, but the outpost stood intact. Ambrose felt a twinge of pride, overshadowed by the swirling thought, "I just risked my life for a paycheck, and I'm not sure how I feel about that." The sun rose harsh and unforgiving, revealing the aftermath of the night's attack. Bullet-riddled sandbags, scattered shell casings glinting like dull coins in the dirt, and the acrid stench of burnt diesel hung in the air. Ambrose woke stiff and sore in the bunkhouse, still wearing most of his gear. Sleep had barely found him. He stepped outside, the desert breeze already scorching by mid-morning. Salazar and Travis were checking the perimeter, while Becker barked orders to a few local guards. As Ambrose approached, Becker gave him a nod. "We lost 2 men, 1 local contractor. Could have been worse." Ambrose's gut churned. He forced a swallow. Yeah, it was close. Ronan emerged from behind a row of sand-filled drums. He gave Ambrose a tired half-smile. "You did good fixing that Humvee under fire took guts." Ambrose just shrugged. Someone had to do it. They walked to a makeshift command tent. The midday sun glared off the canvas roof, turning the tent into a sweltering oven. A single fan rattled in the corner, pushing around hot air. Inside, a battered table was spread with satellite photos and maps. Ronan tapped a spot marked by a red X. "We've gotten intel that a local warlord is building up arms. High chance we'll see more attacks unless we reinforce or relocate." Becker folded his arms. "Problem is, we're contract-bound to protect this outpost for at least another 2 weeks. If we bail, we lose the payday." Ambrose studied the map, brow furrowed. "So we're sticking it out?" Ronan's gaze hardened. "Exactly. We adapt, we survive. That's what we're paid to do." Outside the tent, a small circle of local laborers arrived to patch bullet holes in the perimeter walls. Ambrose watched them work, noticing fear etched on their faces. They can't leave, he thought. This is their home. The notion unsettled him. Later that evening, Ambrose found Travis perched on a concrete slab, reassembling his rifle with fastidious care. Travis flashed a tight grin. "Man, last night felt like the 4th of July except with real bullets." Ambrose exhaled. "Yeah, real enough." A flicker of guilt tugged at him. He'd never been a big believer in violence. Sure, he had basic Army Reserve training, but he'd never pictured himself pulling a trigger in a real firefight for money. Now, it was happening on a weekly paycheck. Travis must have sensed his mood. "So what's your story, man? You look like you were on a different path before all this." Ambrose hesitated. For a moment, he pictured Aveline's face, the betrayal, the heartbreak. "I guess I needed a clean break from my old life." Travis nodded like he understood. "A lot of us here got something we're running from or trying to bury." Before Ambrose could reply, Ronan appeared, passing each of them a canteen of lukewarm water. "Hydrate, guys. We might have more trouble soon. Also, there's talk of another gig. In Africa. Some big money if we finish up here and transfer. He looked pointedly at Ambrose. You'd be perfect for it. Mechanics and engineering skills are in high demand. Ambrose took a long sip of water, the dryness in his throat persistent. Another gig? We haven't even wrapped this one. Ronan shrugged. Offers come quick. Money's big. Let's just say it makes last night's paycheck look like pocket change. A swirl of unease spiraled in Ambrose's gut. If it's anything like this, it's going to be messy, right? Ronan set down his canteen. Truthfully? Probably messier. You sure you want out of your old life that bad? Ambrose inhaled, remembering the searing pain of seeing Aveline with Lawson, the sense of failure that gnawed at him. I can't go back, he said quietly. Not yet. Ronan offered a small nod. All right, let's see how we wrap things here first. Then you can decide. That night, Ambrose found a secluded corner of the outpost behind a stack of crates. The sky was spattered with stars, a beauty at odds with the tension that permeated the camp. He stared into the darkness, images from the firefight replaying in his head. Muzzle flashes, screaming men, the biting smell of blood and cordite. His phone had a single bar of service. A fleeting impulse urged him to call home maybe a friend, maybe check on what Aveline had done with the divorce papers, but he couldn't. He tossed the phone back into his bag, scowling at the thought of hearing her voice. He closed his eyes, remembering the vow he'd made. I won't be weak anymore. Still, a crack of doubt threatened to form. Am I really just trading one kind of pain for another? After another week of tense guard shifts and sporadic skirmishes, the outpost's contract finally approached its end. Despite a few more hostile attempts, Black Claw Outpost held strong. Each clash hardened Ambrose's resolve and chipped away at his old self. On the final evening, Becker gathered everyone around a makeshift table where the local commanding officer handed out envelopes of cash. The pay was substantial enough for Ambrose to clear his debts back home and then some. Travis whooped, brandishing his envelope like a golden ticket. Salazar just smiled quietly. Ronan approached Ambrose, arms crossed over his chest. So you still interested in that Africa contract? Ambrose nodded, though his stomach fluttered. Yeah, he said, voice firm. I'm not done yet. He couldn't quite say if it was purely about the money, or if it was also about outrunning the ghost of who he used to be. They loaded into the same rickety plane that had brought them, the cargo bay now packed with crates of dismantled gear. The desert wind whipped at the runway as they prepared for takeoff, dust swirling in spirals like tiny tornadoes. Ambrose took one last look at the outpost behind him, a place that had tested him in ways he never foresaw. The plane's engines roared, and soon they were airborne, leaving behind the endless dunes and stifling heat. Ambrose stared out the small window, the horizon a haze of beige fading into night. He felt an odd mix of relief and anticipation. There was no going back to the man he'd been. Mid-flight, Ronan sat down beside him. We'll have a short layover in a neighboring country, then connect to wherever they need us. Could be we hop straight to the new contract. Ambrose fiddled with his seatbelt. Right. And the details? Ronan shrugged. A rebel group. A local leader who's paying top dollar to take out his competition. It'll be more complex terrain, politics, all that. But the money's real. Ambrose closed his eyes, exhaustion weighing on him. He recalled his first firefight, the muzzle flashes still etched into his mind. This is the road I've chosen, he told himself. No turning back now. The plane shuddered slightly as it climbed higher. Travis dozed off in a seat nearby, his rifle cradled like a teddy bear. Salazar quietly hummed a Spanish lullaby under his breath. For a brief moment, Ambrose almost felt calm, like he was part of some misfit family, bound by necessity and mutual scars. Staring at the dark sky outside, he wondered if Aveline was even thinking about him. If Lawson had replaced him in every corner of her life. The thought sparked anger, but it quickly cooled into numb acceptance. I made my choice, he repeated in his head. A few hours later, they touched down at a small airstrip, stepping off into a humid night that smelled of jet fuel and uncertainty. Ambrose shouldered his duffel, scanning the sparse lights. Ronan checked a text on his phone, then motioned for everyone to gather. All right, Ronan announced. Next stop, a job that could set us up for life if we play it right. Let's find our transport and move. Ambrose nodded, tightening his grip on his bag. Another day, another battlefield, he mused, heart pounding at the promise of more danger and more money. Ambrose glances at the foreign tarmac, distant lights shining on the horizon. He feels the weight of his new identity, a mercenary, forging forward into the unknown, and wonders if this path will truly give him what he's looking for, or just drown him in deeper shadows. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon as Ambrose stepped off the cargo plane. He was greeted by a wall of humid air so thick it felt like stepping into a greenhouse. The airstrip was a cracked slab of concrete bordered by tall grass and twisted trees. Rain clouds threatened overhead, their dark underbellies flickering with occasional lightning. "Welcome to your new assignment," Ronan murmured, slinging his duffel bag over one shoulder. He squinted at the looming storm. "Get used to it. Rains come hard and fast around here." Ambrose wiped sweat from his brow, mentally noting the stark contrast to the desert climate he'd just left. From scorching sands to steamy jungle, this mercenary gig really does take you everywhere, he thought. They were soon herded onto battered jeeps piloted by local drivers who spoke rapid-fire French or a local dialect Ambrose couldn't grasp. The convoy lurched onto a muddy road, fishtailing around potholes and tree roots. Towering palms and dense foliage encroached from both sides, forming a tunnel of green. Mosquitoes the size of small coins buzzed relentlessly, drawn to the newcomers. An hour later, they arrived at a rough-cut clearing, Camp Red Haven, though Haven felt like a stretch. Camouflage tarps served as roofs for half-erected tents. Wooden pallets were stacked precariously to form walkways over swampy puddles. A sense of organized chaos reigned radio chatter, diesel generators humming, distant sounds of men shouting orders. Ronan gestured toward a central area where flags of uncertain origin flapped in the muggy air. "That's the command post," he said. "We report there first." Ambrose hopped out of the jeep, boots squishing into the muddy ground. A swirl of insects greeted him, making him reflexively swat at his neck. Could it get any more miserable, he wondered? Then he reminded himself he was here by choice, chasing the promise of big money and a final break from the ghosts of his past. At the command post, a makeshift tent with crude wooden desks, he met Temba, a tall, lean man with sharp cheekbones and an intense gaze. He wore a faded military jacket over cargo pants, chest adorned with a row of mismatched patches. "You must be Ambrose," Temba said in clear English, though his accent was thick. "Ronan's told me about you, an engineer who can also handle a rifle." "That's right," Ambrose replied, forcing a polite nod. He noted how Temba's hands occasionally clenched at his sides, as though he was restless or agitated. Temba beckoned them closer to a map pinned under a large stone. "We're fighting to unseat my cousin, a dictator who's crushed our people for too long," he explained, tracing a line across the region. "His forces occupy the capital to the north, but we hold these outer provinces." His voice dropped an octave. "We're short on reliable mechanics, so I need you to keep our vehicles in working order. You'll also oversee the heavier weapons, make sure they're not jamming." Ambrose exchanged a glance with Ronan, who merely nodded as if to say, "This is why we're here." In the background, lightning flashed, and a spatter of rain pinged against the canvas overhead. "How's the situation right now?" Ambrose asked, forcing composure into his voice. Temba's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Tense. My cousin's troops have begun shelling nearby villages. Morale is low, especially with the rain turning roads to sludge, but I have faith we can push forward given the right help." Ronan cleared his throat. "We'll do our job, Temba. Just ensure we have the parts and supplies to keep your vehicles rolling." A faint smile tugged at Temba's lips. "Understood. I'll have my quartermaster show you around." Several hours later, after trudging through sticky mud, Ambrose and Ronan found their designated tent. It was cramped, with 2 cots and a single light bulb swinging from the ceiling. A small generator coughed and sputtered outside, giving off a weak electric hum. "So," Ronan said, pulling off his boots, "you ready to trade desert sand for jungle muck?" Ambrose let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, I guess so. Long as the paycheck's out." Ronan's brow furrowed. "Temba's paying top dollar, but remember, He's also in a war. Resources are tight, and if you break down out there in the jungle, nobody's guaranteed to rescue you. You sure you're up for that? The memory of Aveline's betrayal flickered in Ambrose's mind. A stubborn resolve ignited in his chest. Yes, he said softly. I'm staying. I need this. Ronan patted him on the shoulder. All right, then let's make ourselves useful. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain fell in torrents, drenching the camp in seconds. Ambrose watched as lightning illuminated the silhouettes of men scurrying between tents, water coursing down their gear. The raw, untamed nature of this place matched the turmoil he felt inside, wild, uncertain, and potentially lethal. Still, he set his jaw. He had a new job, keep Temba's vehicles and heavy guns operational. A second wave of determination surged in him. This was a chance to prove his worth again, even if it was in the middle of a hot, mosquito-infested battleground. A faint sunrise struggled to pierce the thick canopy overhead, leaving the encampment shrouded in gray. Ambrose had been up for hours, tinkering with a battered machine gun that refused to feed properly. He cursed under his breath, wiping sweat and grime from his forehead. Mosquito bites burned at the back of his neck, but he'd learned to ignore the itch. Suddenly, a panicked shout echoed across the camp. "Incoming fire! Move! Move!" No sooner had Ambrose looked up than the first mortar shell landed with a deafening crash, sending up a spray of mud and debris. A second explosion followed, this time closer to the vehicles parked under camouflage nets. Soldiers sprinted in all directions, shouting commands in multiple languages. Ambrose lunged behind a stack of sandbags, heart hammering. Mortar rounds whistled overhead, slamming into the ground in sporadic bursts. Temba's voice crackled over the camp's scratchy loudspeakers. "All units to defensive positions. Return fire if you see the enemy." Senses on high alert, Ambrose snatched a rifle lying nearby. He spotted a cluster of Temba's men struggling to load a mortar tube. Bullets from an unseen foe tore through the foliage, slicing through leaves and ripping bark off tree trunks. He ducked and crawled toward an armored truck fitted with a mounted gun. Its operator lay slumped over the side, evidently injured. Blood stained the metal plating. Ambrose's stomach churned at the sight, but he pushed himself to keep going. At that moment, an ear-splitting roar thundered from the eastern edge of camp. Temba's artillery piece fired back, spitting out a round that arced into the jungle. A shrill explosion followed, momentarily shaking the ground. Ambrose scrambled behind the truck. Checking the mounted gun, he realized it was jammed, likely from last night's humidity or poor maintenance. If I can get this working, we might repel them faster, he thought. His hands trembled as he pried open the jammed mechanism, ignoring the gunfire and mortar blasts. Adrenaline surged, letting him push past the fear. Finally, the belt fed properly, and the gun's bolt slid back with a satisfying click. Climbing onto the truck's small platform, he peered over the sandbag wall. In the distance, muzzle flashes flickered through the thick brush enemy fighters, possibly mercenaries allied with Temba's cousin. Taking a breath, Ambrose pressed the trigger. A thunderous rat-a-tat erupted, sending a hail of bullets into the trees. It felt as if the recoil was punching him in the shoulder, but he held steady. In the midst of the chaos, a new, ominous sound sliced through the air, a whoosh unlike the mortars. Before he could react, an RPG streaked across the open clearing, crashing into a makeshift watchtower. The blast shook the earth. Burning debris rained down, and Ambrose caught a glimpse of one of Temba's men falling from the collapsing structure. Cries for medics rose from every corner of the camp. Ambrose's mouth went dry, but he kept firing short, controlled bursts, forcing the attackers to keep their heads down. Then it happened. A mortar shell whistled overhead, landing painfully close. The concussion wave blew Ambrose off the truck, slamming him onto the muddy ground. For a split second, his ears rang so loudly he couldn't hear anything else. Debris pelted his back. Disoriented, he struggled to push himself up. Pain pulsed through his left hand, and he realized with mounting horror that his ring and pinky fingers felt numb, like they weren't there at all. He forced a look. The tip of his ring finger was gone, replaced by a slick patch of blood. A wave of nausea hit him. His vision blurred, but reflex, maybe training, kicked in. He crawled away from open ground, pressing his mangled hand to his chest to staunch the bleeding. Fire and gunshots raged on. Another soldier dragged him behind a fallen tree trunk, breath ragged. "You're hit!" the soldier gasped, gingerly checking Ambrose's hand. "Stay down. We'll call a medic." But the rampage continued. Explosions peppered the camp as Temba's forces fought tooth and nail. Ambrose bit back a scream, sweat pouring down his face, every heartbeat throbbing in his mutilated hand. "I can't black out now," he told himself, blinking away dizziness. Just then, the repaired machine gun roared again. Somebody else had taken over the turret, unleashing fire on the enemy's flank. The tide gradually shifted. As more of Temba's men regrouped, the attackers retreated with scattered gunfire. By the time silence fell, the camp lay devastated. Smoke curled from smashed tents and burning crates. Bodies, enemy and ally, littered the ground. Groans of the injured mingled with the hum of insects. Ambrose's vision swam from blood loss, but he was conscious enough to see Temba rushing over, face etched with grim determination. "We drove them back," Temba said, kneeling beside Ambrose. "You saved us by getting that gun working. Hang on, we'll get you patched up." Ambrose nodded weakly, shock dulling the scorching pain in his hand. He had no words, his mind fixated on the undeniable reality. He'd lost part of himself, literally. For what? He wondered. Money? Revenge? Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. A field medic arrived, applying a makeshift tourniquet. Before Ambrose slipped into unconsciousness, he heard Temba's voice, faint but resolute. "You're a hero, Ambrose. We owe you." When Ambrose woke, a dull ache throbbed where his ring finger used to be. The medic's tent was stifling, lit by a single bulb dangling from a wire. Outside, steady rainfall pattered on the canvas, creating a rhythmic, almost soothing sound if not for the underlying stench of antiseptic and fear. He tried to flex his wounded hand but only managed a feeble twitch. Pain flared, forcing him to grit his teeth. A sharp memory of the mortar blast replayed in his mind, punctuated by the horrifying sight of his own blood. A figure appeared at the tent entrance, Temba, flanked by 2 guards. He approached Ambrose's cot, expression grim but respectful. "I'm glad you're awake." Ambrose sat up slowly, mind swirling. "How long was I out?" "Half a day," Temba said, pulling a small stool closer. "We stabilized your hand as best we could. Lost the tip of your ring finger. Some nerve damage, but you'll live." Ambrose exhaled shakily, staring at the bandaged stump. "Yeah, I guess I'm lucky." Temba nodded. "I want you to know your quick action saved the entire camp. That turret you fixed became the key to driving the attackers off." Emotion churned in Ambrose's chest, part pride, part deep-seated dread. Before he could reply, Temba extended a small envelope. "Your bonus," he said quietly. "One of many, I hope. You are valuable to our cause. A real hero." Ambrose accepted the envelope, its contents thick with cash. But he felt no real joy. Instead, the weight of what he'd sacrificed made the money feel oddly hollow in his hands. "I lost a finger, maybe more of myself than that," he thought bitterly. Over the following days, Ambrose forced himself to adapt. With a bandaged left hand, he found routine tasks a challenge, but he persevered, relearning how to hold a wrench, how to steady a rifle. Temba's men regarded him with newfound respect, some saluting as he passed. At night, though, sleep offered little relief. He jerked awake from nightmares of mortar blasts and pools of blood. Sometimes he'd stare at the missing tip of his finger in the faint lantern light, grappling with a sense of horror that lingered. Ronan, noticing Ambrose's disquiet, took him aside one afternoon. They sat on a pair of ammo crates behind the vehicle bay, the distant jungle humming with life. Ronan fished out a battered pack of cigarettes, offering one silently. Ambrose shook his head. "You're not the first to get hurt out here," Ronan said, voice lowered. "I know it's messing with your head." Ambrose forced a half-smile. "Losing a piece of me wasn't on my to-do list, but guess it comes with the job." Ronan blew out a thin stream of smoke. "You can call it quits, you know. I have contacts who can get you on a plane home." Ambrose hesitated. The flash of Aveline's image danced on the edge of his mind, her betrayal, the heartbreak. Going home meant facing everything he'd run from. He glanced at the wad of cash in his pocket. Enough to live on for a while, maybe more. But a stubborn fire flickered in his gut, the same drive that had carried him through the last battle. "No," he said slowly. "Not yet. I need more than this. More money. more distance from what happened back home. I haven't proven myself enough. He wasn't sure if he was lying to Ronan or to himself. Ronan shrugged, stubbing out his cigarette. Then let's keep going, partner. Just don't let it consume you. That night, the medical tent was quieter. Ambrose had been cleared to return to light duties, but rest was mandatory. He lay on his cot, staring at the overhead lantern's dancing flame. Every so often, he flexed the bandaged hand, feeling the phantom sensation of a finger that no longer existed. His mind drifted to an odd blend of past and future. He imagined how his life might have been if Aveline hadn't betrayed him. Maybe they'd be planning a family now. That thought twisted into a pang of bitterness. Then he caught himself recalling the desert, the firefights, and now this steamy jungle. Am I just chasing chaos? He wondered. A rustle at the tent flap startled him. Temba stood there holding a small tin cup. For the pain, he offered. Herbal remedy my people use, stronger than it looks. Ambrose accepted it warily, sipping the bitter concoction. Warmth spread through his limbs, dulling the throbbing in his hand. Thanks, he murmured. Tomorrow, Temba said, stepping closer. We move to reclaim territory deeper in the interior. I'd like you with us managing the heavier trucks, or whatever we salvage along the way. Are you ready? Ambrose paused, considering his still-healing injury. Then that stubborn flicker of resolve flared up again. I'll be there. Temba smiled, a moment of genuine gratitude breaking through his stern demeanor. Good. Rest now. We leave at dawn. A muddy convoy of trucks, armored jeeps, and ragtag pickups stretched along the narrow dirt path. Towering trees canopied above, filtering the sunlight into dappled patches on the ground. The heat was oppressive, but Ambrose felt a surge of adrenaline. This is it, Temba's big push. He tightened the makeshift bandage around his hand, ignoring the dull throb. Temba led the column from the front in a reinforced jeep, while Ronan hung back near Ambrose's position, scanning the dense undergrowth for ambushes. The local soldiers marched alongside, rifles at the ready. Now and then, the shrill call of a distant bird broke the tension. As they advanced, remnants of conflict grew evident. Abandoned checkpoints, burnt-out villages, twisted hulks of vehicles left to rust in the jungle's relentless grip. Each sight gnawed at Ambrose's mind. He'd never fully grasped how total war could be, how it seeped into every corner of a land, leaving scars in the earth and on its people. In the early afternoon, the convoy halted at a blockade of felled trees. Temba radioed for men to clear it, but gunfire erupted from the surrounding brush. The ambush was swift and brutal. Bullets pinged off steel, and a cacophony of shouts and screams filled the humid air. Ambrose dived behind a truck, wincing as his bandaged hand brushed against the rough metal. He aimed his rifle into the jungle, firing controlled bursts at muzzle flashes. Ronan let out a curse, returning fire from behind a crate of ammunition. Temba's voice crackled over the radio. "Push forward! We have to break through!" Bolstered by Temba's command, the forward vehicles revved their engines. Troops rushed to drag the logs out of the way, bullets whizzing overhead. Ambrose caught sight of a rocket launcher being hoisted by enemy fighters behind a fallen tree. If they fired, the entire convoy could be decimated. Steeling himself, Ambrose sprinted toward a half-covered machine gun mounted on a Humvee. The gunner lay slumped, wounded or worse, so Ambrose pushed the body aside gently, swallowing a surge of guilt. With only his one good hand, he struggled to pivot the gun, teeth clenched in pain. Then he squeezed the trigger, unleashing a storm of lead in the enemy's direction. A deafening chain of blasts echoed as return fire peppered the Humvee's armor. Ambrose's arms shook from the recoil, but he refused to let up. Finally, he heard a scream and saw the rocket launcher tip sideways, the enemy scrabbling to retreat. "Move! Move! Move!" Temba shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. Soldiers charged, dislodging the remaining logs while a handful of them provided covering fire. One by one, the vehicles lurched forward, inching past the blockade. The firefight was intense, but the ambushers eventually lost their nerve, disappearing into the thick foliage. When the path cleared, Temba ordered the convoy onward, not wanting to give the attackers a chance to regroup. Ambrose hopped onto the side of a truck, gripping the rail with his good hand. Every jolt sent pain through his injured one. By late afternoon, they reached a small town little more than a cluster of huts and a dirt square where Temba's flag soon replaced those of his cousin's militia. Exhausted but fueled by victory, the soldiers spread out to secure the area. Smoke curled from a few smoldering buildings, evidence of a recent skirmish. The stench of gunpowder and sweat hung heavy. While Temba's officers rallied the local populace, some of whom cheered, others looked on with wary eyes. Ambrose helped set up a makeshift command station. He found a battered radio, managing to coax it into picking up signals from Temba's allied units. Ronan approached, wiping a streak of grime from his forehead. "Heard you took out a rocket team back there. Nice work." Ambrose shrugged, exhaustion evident on his face. "Got lucky. Could have ended badly." Ronan studied Ambrose's bandaged hand. "You sure about continuing this? You've done enough to secure your payout." A tired smile flickered across Ambrose's features. "This might sound insane, but I can't stop now. I'm here. Might as well see it through." Ronan clapped him on the shoulder. "Just don't lose the rest of your fingers, okay?" Come nightfall, Temba called Ambrose to a clearing where a few trucks had been arranged in a defensive ring. Map spread on the hood of a jeep, Temba traced a route straight toward the capital. "We're close to toppling my cousin's regime," he explained, voice brimming with fervor. "One final push and the city is ours." Ambrose could see the ambition blazing in Temba's eyes, determination born of years of oppression. "What happens after you take the city?" he asked quietly. A fleeting look of uncertainty crossed Temba's face. "First we rebuild, then we restore freedom. But no illusions. It'll take time and money." He laid a hand on Ambrose's arm. "When this is over, I'll make sure you're well compensated. You'll never want for anything again." Ambrose swallowed the knot in his throat. The promise of wealth tugged at him, as did a strange sense of loyalty to Temba's cause. He recalled the dregs of his old life, that humiliating final day in the U.S. "If I can walk away from here loaded, I can truly start over." He exhaled slowly, nodding. "Then let's finish this." A faint orange glow crowned the horizon as Ambrose's convoy rumbled down a cracked highway toward a small border town. The jungle thinned out here, giving way to a wide stretch of savanna dotted with brittle shrubs. Dust clung to the air, painted gold by the morning sun. Temba's forces had pushed the bulk of the dictator's army back toward the capital, leaving this once-contested region in relative calm, or so they hoped. Ambrose sat in the passenger seat of a dented military truck. His left hand, still missing that finger, throbbed now and then, an unsettling reminder of the battles behind him. Up ahead, Temba's jeep led the way, flying a makeshift banner that signaled their allegiance. Rows of expressionless soldiers rode in silence, scanning the horizon for threats. Within an hour, they reached the outskirts of the town, a cluster of low buildings, some cinder block, others corrugated tin. But any sense of normalcy was overshadowed by the wreckage that greeted them. Burned-out cars, bullet-riddled walls, and shattered windows. A handful of residents peeked from behind doors, eyes filled with caution and fatigue. Temba halted the convoy in what looked like a central square, though half of it was cratered by mortar shells. He beckoned Ambrose over, pointing to a battered sign in a language Ambrose didn't recognize. "We need supplies and intel," Temba said in a low voice. "But watch your back. Criminals and deserters roam these parts now that the main army has retreated." Ambrose nodded, adjusting the strap of his rifle. "Understood. I'll scout around, see if anyone's selling food or fuel." Temba gave a curt nod. "Take 2 men with you. Check that old bar at the corner. We heard rumors of a merchant who trades in black market goods." As Ambrose and 2 of Temba's soldiers navigated the rubble-strewn streets, they passed makeshift stalls where desperate locals peddled scavenged items, rusty tools, wilted vegetables, faded clothing. The soldiers kept their weapons visible, discouraging any would-be thieves. The tension in the air felt thick, like everyone was one frayed nerve away from panic. Eventually, they found a rundown building with a sign that might once have read La Lune Bar. Its neon letters were cracked, now only the L and part of the U still flickering weakly. Inside, the smell of spilled alcohol, sweat, and stale smoke hung in the gloom. A few battered tables lay overturned. Debris crunched under Ambrose's boots. His eyes adjusted to the dim light. At the far end of the bar stood a small group of rough-looking men. One had a bandaged arm, another clutched a shotgun. They turned suspicious gazes on Ambrose and his companions. A wiry bartender in a stained apron peered over the counter. "We're out of almost everything," he said, voice hollow. "No beer, no decent whiskey, just troubles." Ambrose forced a faint smile, ignoring the stares. "I'm not here for the drinks. I need to trade for supplies, food, maybe spare parts for vehicles. Heard someone in town deals with that." The bartender snorted, leaning against the chipped wood. "There's a merchant named Aurelio. Shows up now and then. Offloads goods from who knows where. He might come by this evening if you're lucky." "Appreciate it," Ambrose replied, sliding a small wad of currency across the bar. The bartender's eyes lit up momentarily, a spark of gratitude or greed, maybe both. One of Temba's soldiers tapped Ambrose's shoulder. "Sir, they have some dried rations for sale. Might be old, but it's something." Ambrose nodded. "Right. Let's do it." He was about to follow the soldier when a muffled shout erupted from a back room. A scuffle, then a door slammed. Tension rippled through the bar. The rough-looking men by the wall stiffened, hands inching toward weapons. Ambrose instinctively reached for his rifle, scanning for threats. Silence lingered for a beat before the bartender cleared his throat. "Just a drunk fool," he muttered, waving it off. But Ambrose's gut told him otherwise. Probably a petty gang harassing people. A minor surge of anger roiled in him. These war-torn towns were ripe for exploitation by scum who thrived on fear. Still, Temba's orders were clear. Gather supplies, avoid unnecessary conflict. Ambrose let it slide. He signaled the soldier to purchase whatever rations they could, while he turned away to observe the bar's ragged patrons. Each face told a story of desperation, sunken eyes, trembling hands. "We're all just survivors now," he thought bitterly. After finalizing the trade, Ambrose stepped outside, the mid-morning sun glaring. He inhaled dust-laden air, feeling uneasy. "We'll load up and head back to Temba," he told the soldiers. "We can return later if we need more." One soldier nodded. "Yes, sir." In the square, Temba was busy talking with a local elder, a frail woman with a resolute gaze. She clutched a woven basket, half filled with meager provisions. As Ambrose approached, he caught fragments of their conversation. The woman pleaded for more protection, describing nightly raids by roving bandits. Temba's mouth pressed into a grim line. He gestured to his troops as if promising safety, but Ambrose could see Temba's frustration. His men were stretched thin, and the main focus was capturing the capital. The outskirts, for now, were left to fend for themselves. "Anything worth noting in the bar?" Temba asked Ambrose quietly, stepping aside from the elder. "Some potential trades, but no sign of real security," Ambrose replied. "Desperate folks. Tensions are high." Temba exhaled. "We'll keep some men here for the day, then push onward. The capital's within reach. My cousin's forces are falling back, but we can't be complacent." Before Ambrose could respond, a ragged teenage boy sprinted into the square, shouting in a local dialect. Temba's translator hurried over. "He says a group of criminals is extorting food from the next village, not far from here." The translator's voice wavered with urgency. "They might be allied with the dictator's forces." Ambrose's gaze flicked to Temba. "We handle it?" Temba nodded. "Quickly then. We can't let them regroup." Late afternoon sunlight bathed the broken road in harsh orange hues as Ambrose's small team advanced toward the neighboring village. They navigated around rusted car husks and piles of rubble. Occasionally, they spotted frightened villagers peering from behind flimsy doors. Shots rang out in the distance, followed by shouting. Ambrose exchanged a sharp look with one of Temba's soldiers. "That way," he said, pointing to a narrow street wedged between half-collapsed houses. The group hurried toward the commotion, weapons at the ready. Rounding a corner, they found a rowdy band of heavily armed men cornering a group of civilians outside what appeared to be a rundown inn. People cried out, clutching children behind them. One thug pinned a young woman against the wall, her hair a striking blonde, face streaked with dirt. She struggled, kicking at her assailant. The man sneered, reeking of cheap liquor. Ambrose's anger flared. He motioned for the soldiers to fan out. "Stop!" he barked, stepping forward with his rifle raised. The thug glanced over, eyes narrowing. For a split second, the tension crackled. Then the thug pulled a pistol and aimed it at Ambrose. Without hesitation, Ambrose squeezed off a short burst. The thug collapsed, pistol clattering to the ground. His accomplices spun around, firing wildly. The small courtyard erupted in gunfire. Civilians screamed and ducked. Temba's soldiers unleashed measured shots, systematically taking down 2 more criminals. One tried to flee, only to be tackled by a wiry local who clubbed him with a broken plank. Amid the chaos, Ambrose spotted the young woman with blonde hair drop to her knees, trembling. Another drunken goon loomed above her, about to grab her arm. Ambrose pivoted, heart pounding, and fired a warning shot into the dirt. "Back off!" The attacker hesitated, eyes darting between Ambrose's rifle and the bodies of his comrades. Finally, he threw up his hands in surrender, cursing under his breath. 2 villagers seized the opportunity to wrestle him down. Smoke and dust settled as the last shots echoed away. The courtyard grew eerily still except for ragged breathing and muffled sobs. Ambrose moved toward the young woman, rifle lowered. She looked up at him, eyes wide with shock. He noticed then that her cheeks were stained not just with grime but also tears. "You okay?" he asked gently. Her clothes were torn at the shoulder, revealing bruises. "You're safe now." She took a shuddering breath, brushing tangled strands of blonde hair off her face. "Thank you," she stammered in accented English. I don't know how to repay." "Hey, it's all right," he assured her. "We heard gunfire and came to help." He waved over a soldier who quickly checked on other civilians. One of the villagers spoke up, pointing to the woman. "She's a foreigner, says she's stranded here. Her name is Ophelia." "Ophelia?" Ambrose repeated, turning back to her. She nodded, clutching at the torn fabric of her shirt for modesty. Her accent, he realized, sounded Belgian or French. "How long have you been stuck here?" She swallowed hard. "A few weeks, maybe. I was traveling, got caught in the fighting. My father was injured, evacuated on a UN transport, but there was no room for me. Since then, I've been surviving." Her voice wobbled, tears threatening again. "They took my money, my passport, everything." Ambrose felt a twist in his gut. Another casualty of this God-forsaken war. He glanced at the men lying on the ground, 2 dead, a few wounded. They would have done worse to her. With a deep breath, he stripped off his spare jacket from his pack and offered it to her. "Here, cover up." Ophelia pulled it around her shoulders, blinking away tears. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. After ensuring the thugs were disarmed and secured, Ambrose gathered a quick briefing from the villagers. They confirmed the criminals had been extorting food and terrorizing anyone in sight. The group admired Temba's soldiers for intervening, but the stares lingering on Ambrose were equal parts caution and respect, like they'd just witnessed a man capable of both violence and mercy. Ophelia stood to the side, hugging herself as though trying to vanish in the midst of the crowd. Ambrose approached. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked softly. She shook her head, eyes brimming with uncertainty. "I had some money saved to travel home, but it's gone now. I can't stay here, it's too dangerous." Ambrose glanced at the horizon. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in bruised oranges and purples. "We've set up a camp on the outskirts," he said. "You can come with us for tonight, at least. We'll find a safer spot in the morning." She looked torn, as though mistrust warred with desperation. But at last, she nodded. "Okay, I have no choice." A gentle wave of relief washed over Ambrose. He wasn't sure why he felt protective toward her, maybe because she reminded him of a life outside this chaos, or maybe because seeing her so vulnerable stirred something humane he thought he'd lost. They led Ophelia to the truck, letting her sit up front while Temba's men loaded supplies in the back. Before they pulled away, a few villagers approached, thanking Ambrose for the rescue. One old man pressed a small pouch of dried beans into Ambrose's hand, a meager gift, but a heartfelt gesture. Ambrose swallowed a lump in his throat. They have so little, yet they're still grateful enough to share. As the truck rumbled off, Ophelia clutched Ambrose's jacket tighter. She stared out the window, watching the shattered village fade into the gathering dusk. Ambrose stole a sideways glance at her. Even in exhaustion and fear, her face held a quiet resilience. Night draped the makeshift camp in a cloak of deep navy, punctuated by flickering lanterns and the distant glow of Temba's watchfires. Crickets and night birds chattered, but the undercurrent of tension hummed as steadily as the surrounding jungle. Ambrose felt it in the prickling at the back of his neck, the sense that enemies still lurked somewhere in the shadows. Ophelia sat beside him near a smoldering campfire, wrapped in a thin blanket. A soldier had scrounged up some canned beans and stale crackers, which she picked at quietly. Ambrose noticed how she flinched at every sudden noise, a snapped twig, a raised voice. "You okay?" he asked, keeping his tone gentle. She managed a small nod. "Just everything is spinning in my head." She paused, eyes flicking to his bandaged left hand. "I'm sorry, you're hurt too." He flexed the remaining fingers, ignoring the dull ache. "I've seen worse," he said softly. "Lost part of a finger in a mortar blast. Nothing life-threatening." Her gaze searched his face. "Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "Phantom pains, mostly. But it's more a reminder of what I've done, what I've been through." Ophelia hugged the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I never thought I'd be in a war zone," she whispered. "I was just traveling with my father. He had diplomatic work in the capital, and we stopped over. Then everything collapsed." Ambrose suppressed a surge of anger at the chaos that had dragged countless innocents into the crossfire. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything you've lost." Silence lingered between them, broken only by the crackle of burning wood. Above, stars shimmered in a moonless sky. Ambrose found himself strangely grateful to have someone else to talk to, someone whose life didn't revolve around bullets and paychecks. Close to midnight, a panicked shout echoed from the far end of the camp. "Enemy scouts spotted!" Gunshots followed, sending a jolt of adrenaline through everyone. Ambrose leapt to his feet, rifle in hand. Temba's men scrambled, dousing fires and taking defensive positions. Ophelia's eyes flashed with alarm. "What do I do?" she asked, voice shaking. "Stay low, stick close to me," Ambrose instructed, guiding her toward a thick clump of brush that offered some cover. As tracer rounds arced overhead, he scanned the darkness. The muzzle flashes suggested a small group attacking from the eastern tree line. Temba's voice boomed from somewhere out of sight. "Engage carefully. Don't let them pin us down." Ambrose's heart hammered. If the scouts had found them, it might mean a larger force wasn't far behind. That spelled danger not just for Temba's troops, but also for Ophelia and the few civilians who'd tagged along. He squeezed off a few shots into the shadows, pushing back the assailants. Then he ducked behind a fallen log, pulling Ophelia down beside him. She trembled, one hand clutching his arm. Are we going to die?" she whispered, tears glinting in the faint light. He forced a grim smile, adrenaline coursing. "Not if I have anything to say about it. Stay close." The skirmish lasted mere minutes. Temba's soldiers outnumbered the intruders. A few shouts rang out, then the gunfire died down. "They're retreating," someone called. A wave of relief washed over Ambrose. He stood slowly, scanning for any further threat. His pulse still thundered in his ears, but at least this time the threat seemed contained. A couple of Temba's men rushed past, presumably to chase the fleeing attackers. Ophelia exhaled shakily, letting go of Ambrose's arm. She wiped tears with the back of her hand. "Thank you." He nodded, mind already racing. If the enemy scouts had found them here, the position was compromised. They needed to move fast. Temba must have come to the same conclusion, because he strode over, jaw clenched. "We're leaving," Temba said, voice edged with urgency. "The scouts will report back. We can't risk a bigger ambush. Gather everyone who can walk." Ambrose nodded. "What about the wounded or slow?" Temba's gaze flickered with regret. "We'll take who we can, but we must not be cornered. Our priority is reaching the main force near the capital." Ophelia overheard, her face pale. "You're going to the capital now?" "Yes," Ambrose said, slipping his rifle's strap over his shoulder. "But it's the only safe place if Temba's about to capture it. You want to come?" She hesitated, eyes darting across the anxious faces in the camp. "I have no one else. I'll go." Within minutes, the camp was dismantled in a flurry of hushed orders and frantic packing. Trucks growled to life, headlights piercing the darkness. Ambrose helped Ophelia climb into the back of an open-top Jeep. Another soldier tossed him a half-full jerry can of fuel, which he secured behind the seat. As they sped away, the wind whipped Ambrose's hair, stinging his cheeks with dust. Ophelia clung to the roll bar, knuckles white. The jungle night enveloped them, silhouettes of trees rushing past like silent sentinels. Temba's jeep led the way, headlights bobbing over uneven ground. Ambrose glanced at Ophelia. She stared ahead, expression tight with fear and uncertainty, yet there was a faint spark of determination in her eyes. She's stronger than she knows, he thought. A flicker of admiration stirred in him something he hadn't felt in a long time. When they finally slowed near a shallow river crossing, Temba signaled everyone to stop. The convoy formed a tight circle, engines idling. Moonlight now bathed the scene, revealing anxious faces. Temba gathered Ambrose and a few other key figures. "We can't linger," Temba muttered. "But we need rest. The capital's still a day's drive at least, and we're exhausted. 2 hours, then we push on." Ambrose nodded, casting a glance at Ophelia. She stood apart, arms folded protectively. He approached, offering a hesitant smile. "We'll rest here a bit." She looked up, exhaustion etched in her features. "Thank you. I'm grateful," she managed, voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what I'd do if you hadn't come." A warm flush crept up Ambrose's neck. "It's nothing. You'll be safe with us." The words felt heavy with unspoken promise, like he was reassuring himself as much as her. Dawn broke over a grim tableau. The capital's outskirts lay in ruins, streets choked with rubble and burnt-out vehicles. Yet Temba's flag fluttered from makeshift barricades, signaling the dictator's forces had finally crumbled. Civilians ventured out from hiding, cautiously welcoming Temba's soldiers as liberators. Ambrose stood on a war-ravaged boulevard, the stench of smoke and dust hanging in the humid air. Beside him, Ophelia gazed around, eyes wide with equal parts relief and sorrow. The city had suffered collapsed walls, shattered glass, pockmarked concrete from gunfights. A rumor rippled through Temba's ranks that the dictator had fled in the night. By midday, Temba himself appeared on a battered balcony, proclaiming victory to a crowd of weary survivors. Their cheers, though ragged, carried a note of real hope. After the speech, Temba found Ambrose near an abandoned government building. The new leader's face bore lines of exhaustion, but also triumph. Without hesitation, he pressed a thick envelope into Ambrose's hand. "Your final payment and a bonus," Temba said quietly. "You made this possible." Ambrose peered inside, stunned by the stack of bills. More money than he'd ever held at once. It felt surreal, this tangible reward for all the blood and sacrifice. "Thank you," he managed, swallowing hard. Temba laid a hand on Ambrose's shoulder. "We have much rebuilding to do, but you've earned the right to go home or wherever you wish. My people will never forget your help." Home. The word caught in Ambrose's throat. "Do I even have a home left?" he wondered. His gaze flicked to Ophelia, who lingered a few paces away, talking to a soldier. Over the past few days, she'd stayed close, relying on him for safety. Now that the war was winding down, what would she do? That afternoon, Ambrose scoured the partially functional airport for a way out of the country. A single battered airplane, run by a small humanitarian outfit, was set to depart the next day. Spaces were limited. Ophelia walked beside him, clutching a ragged backpack someone had donated. "Is there room for me?" she asked, voice tentative. Ambrose raked a hand through his dusty hair. "I'll make sure there is. You've got to get home." She chewed her lip. "What about you?" His heart twisted. He looked at the bandaged stump where part of his finger used to be, remembering every firefight, every night plagued by nightmares. "I could use a break from gunfire," he said wryly. "Might catch the same flight if I can." Ophelia's eyes flickered with something like hope. "Really? You'd leave now?" "I think I've done all I can here." Ambrose offered a small, lopsided smile. "Besides, someone's got to make sure you reach safety." A flush colored her cheeks. "Thank you again." By early evening, word spread that the plane had just enough seats. Ambrose quickly secured tickets for both himself and Ophelia. Temba came to bid farewell, accompanied by a handful of local officials. The mood was strangely celebratory, as though everyone breathed easier now that the dictator had fallen. "Your new life awaits," Temba told Ambrose, extending a hand. "Go with my blessing." Ambrose shook it firmly, torn between relief and a pang of guilt at leaving Temba with a long road of rebuilding. But he'd done his part and earned enough to start fresh. Before they boarded, Ophelia hesitated, scanning the crowd. Her gaze lingered on a medical tent where refugees lined up for aid. I wish I could do something for them," she murmured. Ambrose gently touched her arm. "We've done what we can. Temba's men have supplies now. They'll manage." She nodded, tears threatening. "I know. It's just so much suffering." An hour later, the battered plane roared down a makeshift runway, engines sputtering but holding together. Ambrose and Ophelia strapped into worn seats. She clung to his arm as the wheels rattled on the cracked tarmac. After a few tense moments, they lifted off into the hazy sky. Ophelia exhaled a trembling breath, leaning back in her seat. Through the window, the sprawling, war-torn capital shrank below them. Ambrose watched her reflection in the glass, her features softened, relief mingling with exhaustion. He felt an odd flutter in his chest, something akin to genuine warmth in a life so recently defined by bloodshed. When the plane leveled out, Ophelia turned to him. "Ambrose?" "Yeah?" She placed a hand over his bandaged one, a gesture of gratitude and something deeper. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly, "but I want to keep in touch, if that's possible." A faint smile curved his lips. "I'd like that." She closed her eyes. "When I find my father, I'll let him know everything you did." A pause. Will you ever come see me?" Ambrose's heart twinged with an unfamiliar optimism. "I promise. I'll find you when things settle." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Count on it." Hours later, they landed in a neighboring country's small airport, thronged with relief workers and displaced travelers. Ophelia's flight back to Europe departed the next day, while Ambrose had enough money to figure out his own plans. At the crowded terminal, under flickering fluorescent lights, Ambrose helped carry Ophelia's meager belongings. She looked at him, tears glistening. "I guess this is goodbye." "Only for now," he corrected softly. Then, in an impulsive move, he wrapped an arm around her, pressing her gently into a hug. She trembled, then melted into it, her face burying against his shoulder. For a moment, the busy terminal faded, leaving just the two of them in the swirl of raw emotion. When they pulled apart, Ambrose reached into his pocket and produced a small slip of paper with a note, his new phone number, a post office box address. "Find me," he said. "Anytime." Ophelia held it as though it were precious. "I will." Her voice quivered, but a hopeful sparkle lit her eyes. Ambrose stepped off the jetway at JFK Airport, the chill of the air-conditioned terminal a sharp contrast to the sweltering African climate he'd left behind. His tailored blazer, purchased during a brief layover in Europe, hung comfortably on his broader frame, and a new, high-end wristwatch glinted under the fluorescent lights. The bag slung over his shoulder was the only luggage he carried. It seemed odd that after so much war and upheaval, his entire life fit into a single carry-on. He navigated the busy concourse, keenly aware of how different everything felt. No gunfire, no muzzle flashes, no panicked civilians. Just tourists hurrying between gates, suits with laptops, families on vacation. A normalcy that felt both comforting and strangely disorienting. A familiar voice called out over the crowd, "Ambrose, over here, man!" It was Ronan, leaning against a Starbucks kiosk, casual as ever in a leather jacket and jeans. Ambrose cracked a smile, a genuine one, and weaved past a cluster of travelers to greet him. "Didn't think you'd be waiting," Ambrose said, extending a handshake that turned into a quick, gruff hug. "Figured you had your own gigs." Ronan shrugged, smirking. "I do. But you're back on home soil for the first time in ages. I figured you could use a friendly face." He stepped back, taking in Ambrose's refined attire and the faint scar peeking from his collar. "You look different, more confident. Heard you came out of Africa loaded." Ambrose's mouth twitched in a wry grin. "Word travels fast." "Yeah, it does," Ronan replied, guiding him to an exit. "Come on, I've got a car waiting. Let's catch up." They settled into the back seat of a sleek black SUV. courtesy of a driver Ronan apparently knew. The city skyline blurred by as they left the airport behind, neon signs and skyscrapers twinkling in early evening light. "So," Ronan began, giving Ambrose a sidelong glance, "I've already heard you're basically a mini-millionaire now." Ambrose gave a rueful chuckle. "It's enough to start a new life, that's for sure. No more mercenary gigs if I can help it." Ronan nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah? So you're done being a hired gun?" "That's the plan," Ambrose replied softly, absent-mindedly rubbing the stump where his ring finger used to be. "Got a tip about a small manufacturing company, JS Components, apparently on the brink of expanding. I want in, maybe secure controlling shares, see if I can transform it." He exhaled, glancing at the city lights. "Tired of living day-to-day, dodging bullets?" Ronan regarded him with an approving nod. "Sounds legitimate, and if you do it right, you'll be set for life. Folks keep telling me those specialized manufacturing firms can blow up if they land the right contracts." "Exactly," Ambrose said. "And I have some contacts from my old defense job. Might open doors." His jaw tightened unconsciously, remembering that old job and the betrayal that came with it. "Speaking of which, any news on Lawson Ellington?" Ronan tapped the window with a knuckle, eyes distant. "Last I checked, Lawson's not exactly king of the hill anymore. Word is, he had a public falling out with Aveline. She apparently left him after cheating again, or so the rumor goes. Meanwhile, Ellington Defense has had some financial setbacks. Unclear if they'll bounce back or fold." Ambrose's heart gave a little jolt at hearing Aveline's name, but the pain was dulled by time. "So they're both in a tough spot," he murmured. "Couldn't happen to a nicer pair." Ronan snorted. "Karma, man. Anyway, you want me to drop you at your old place?" Ambrose shook his head. "Sold that place after the divorce. I booked a suite downtown for now. Need to meet with JS Components director first thing tomorrow." "Got it," Ronan replied. As they neared the glitzy skyline, he punched Ambrose's shoulder playfully. "Welcome home, partner. Let's see how well you handle corporate boardrooms compared to battlefields." They arrived at a chic hotel tower. The doorman quickly helped with Ambrose's single bag, eyeing Ronan warily. Before parting ways, Ronan extracted a small envelope and pressed it into Ambrose's hand. "This is my new contact info just in case. If you ever get bored of suits and need real action again, you know who to call." Ambrose forced a smirk. "Thanks, but I'll try not to get shot at for a while." Ronan laughed, slapping the SUV's roof. "Fair enough. Good luck with the big money, folks." Ambrose watched the SUV merge into traffic, then turned to face the gleaming hotel doors. A new chapter, he reminded himself. Inside the lobby, ambient music and polished marble floors greeted him, a world away from the dusty roads of conflict zones. Yet a tiny voice inside whispered that no matter how upscale his surroundings, the scars he carried, physical and emotional, weren't so easily shaken off. Still, he inhaled deeply and stepped forward. He was home, or close enough to it. Whatever came next, he was determined to face it head-on, free from the ghosts of war and heartbreak. For the first time in a long while, Ambrose felt like maybe, just maybe, his future was his to shape. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass-paneled walls of JS Components, a modest industrial building set in a suburban tech park. Ambrose rode the elevator up to the executive floor, crisp navy suit in place, his posture embodying a calm confidence he'd honed under far more perilous conditions. Under his arm was a sleek leather portfolio containing enough capital documentation to make a powerful statement. He stepped into a reception area that was tidy, though not overly lavish. A young receptionist glanced up, eyes widening slightly at his imposing aura. "Good morning, sir. You must be Mr. Ambrose?" "That's right," he said, offering a polite nod. "I have an appointment with Thomas Reynolds. The board meeting, correct?" "Absolutely. They're waiting in the conference room," she replied, pressing a button on her headset. "This way, please." Inside the conference room, a long table dominated the space, flanked by a few men and women in business attire. At the head sat Thomas Reynolds, silver-haired and sharp-eyed JS Components' current managing director. He rose as Ambrose entered. "Mr. Ambrose," Reynolds greeted warmly, extending a handshake. "Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate your interest in our company." Ambrose met his gaze, gripping the handshake firmly. "Thank you for having me. I'm eager to see how we can work together." They settled in, the board members offering cautious smiles. Ambrose opened his portfolio and began outlining his proposition, a substantial capital injection for a controlling stake in JS Components. He praised the firm's specialized manufacturing potential, describing how with the right infusion of funds and the right strategic direction, they could pivot into advanced gearboxes, specialized mechanical components, even expansions into defense supply contracts. Reynolds listened, occasionally glancing at the other board members, who whispered among themselves. After a few pointed questions about Ambrose's background, the conversation turned to the crux. Would he be a passive investor or Hanson? "I intend to be very involved," Ambrose said calmly, recalling the old days at Ellington Defense. "I have experience in engineering and, let's say, operational demands. This is not just about profit, it's about driving innovation. If I'm a majority shareholder, I'll take an active leadership role, CEO, if you will." A few eyebrows shot up. Ambrose expected the surprise. After all, he wasn't a typical corporate suit. Yet the neatness of his proposal and the weight of his capital did most of the talking. Reynolds nodded slowly. "You're aware we have certain expansions in mind, particularly if we find a solid partnership with a defense contractor?" Ambrose's pulse quickened. That's exactly the angle I was hoping for. He offered a measured smile. "Yes, and I have connections that might help us secure major contracts, possibly with foreign partners too." The board fell silent, exchanging looks. One woman, a CFO type, cleared her throat. "We appreciate your credentials, Mr. Ambrose. But are you sure you can handle the complexities of running a manufacturing enterprise? It's far different from field operations." Ambrose dipped his head slightly. "I understand, but I have a team of consultants ready to step in if needed. And, to be candid, I've navigated more life or death complexities than most. I learn quickly." His expression was polite yet unwavering, the same look that once stared down armed militants. Reynolds glanced at the CFO, then at the board, and finally nodded. "I see. Let's finalize terms. If we agree, we'll schedule a formal press announcement. Sound good?" "Perfect," Ambrose replied. A flicker of satisfaction coursed through him. The deal was practically sealed. An hour later, documents were signed, handshakes exchanged. Ambrose walked out of the conference room as JS Components' new majority shareholder, effectively the soon-to-be CEO, once the official process is cleared. He felt the faint stirring of excitement in his gut, a sense of constructive ambition. No more aimless drifting. This is my future. But as he stepped into the hallway, he glimpsed a framed news article on the wall about a past collaboration between JS Components and Ellington Defense. Immediately, Lawson Ellington's face flashed in Ambrose's mind. So that's where the synergy might come from, he mused, tapping the edge of the frame. Perhaps the synergy would be beneficial, or maybe it was an opportunity for something else, something personal. Later, in Reynolds's office, they popped open a modest bottle of champagne to celebrate the partnership. Ambrose sipped, scanning the city skyline through the large window. "Reynolds," he began casually, "I recall JS Components once worked with Ellington Defense on some prototypes. Any chance that might revive?" Reynolds chuckled wryly. "Lawson Ellington is quite the character. Our past project ended abruptly when his firm's finances got shaky. He's been trying to resurface in the market, though." Ambrose arched a brow. "Interesting. If there's a path to cooperate again, maybe on a new gearbox design, I'd like to explore it." Reynolds shrugged. "If it means a big contract, sure. But be cautious, Lawson's well. He's not an easy man to deal with. There's talk of questionable deals abroad." Ambrose's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "I can handle it." A week later, Ambrose sat in JS Components' newly furnished CEO office, a modest but respectable space with large windows overlooking a landscaped courtyard. Outside, engineers bustled about, already implementing streamlined production processes under Ambrose's direction. The transformation was swift but methodical. He wanted to send a clear message that the company was on the rise. His assistant, a sharp young man named Ethan, knocked lightly. "Sir, you have a visitor in the boardroom. Name's Lawson Ellington. Says he's here to discuss a potential contract." Ambrose felt a surge of adrenaline. So the day's come. With a calm nod, he rose, smoothing his suit jacket. Thanks, Ethan. I'll see him now. In the boardroom, Lawson Ellington stood by the wide glass table, hands clasped behind his back. He wore an impeccable charcoal suit, yet there was a subdued tension in his posture. At the sound of Ambrose's footsteps, Lawson turned. For a beat, they just stared at each other, two men with a fraught history neither could ignore. Ambrose, Lawson said first, voice measured. Didn't realize you were the new top man at JS Components. Ambrose approached, meeting Lawson's gaze without blinking. Lawson, small world, huh? A flicker of something passed over Lawson's face, unease perhaps, but he extended a hand with forced politeness. Ambrose accepted it, their grips equally firm. I have a project that needs specialized gearboxes, Lawson explained, stepping back. Given JS Components' capabilities, I was hoping to arrange a supply deal. Ambrose gestured for him to sit. I'm listening. What's the scope? Lawson cleared his throat. We've secured an international contract light armored vehicles for a Middle Eastern client. Time-sensitive, high volume. I'd need robust, advanced gearboxes within a tight production window. His tone grew more confident as he talked business. Your new MK series design would be ideal. Ambrose leaned forward, concealing a small smile. He must not realize I orchestrated that design push. And why not produce it in-house at Ellington Defense? You used to have all the resources. Lawson's jaw tightened slightly. We've had some financial restraints. Mergers fell through, so we're subcontracting certain components. Figured we'd bury the hatchet, so to speak, for mutual benefit. Ambrose studied him. The old arrogance still lingered in Lawson's posture, but cracks showed he was no longer the alpha dog who overshadowed Ambrose at the old company. I'll consider it, Ambrose said neutrally, but I have conditions. We'll need to see the contract details, ensure it aligns with export regulations. Lawson nodded, though his eyes flickered at the mention of regulations. Of course. I brought preliminary specs and timelines. We can negotiate payment terms. Ambrose took the folder Lawson handed over. Their fingers brushed, and Ambrose felt an odd swirl of memories, anger, betrayal, humiliation. Focus on the business, he reminded himself, resisting the urge to show any personal vendetta. I'll have my legal and engineering teams review these, he said. We can reconvene in a few days. Lawson exhaled, as if relieved. Sure, let's do that. They rose, exchanging a stiff handshake. As Lawson turned to leave, he hesitated by the door. Look, Ambrose about the past. Ambrose kept his expression carefully blank. The past is done. Now it's strictly business. A mixture of regret and something else darkened Lawson's features, but he merely nodded. All right, then. I'll wait for your proposal. When the door clicked shut, Ambrose released a slow breath, the tension in his chest palpable. He's more vulnerable than I expected. He pressed the folder to the table, recalling every heartbreak and rage that once consumed him. Yet for the moment he felt oddly calm. Let him think it's just business. Let him think I've moved on. 2 evenings later, the sun dipped behind the city skyline as Ambrose pulled up to a discreet restaurant, a cozy spot with low lighting and plush booths. Lawson had requested a private dinner, claiming they needed to iron out crucial details. Ambrose suspected ulterior motives, but he accepted, driven by curiosity and a quiet hunger for closure. Inside, the maitre d' led him to a secluded corner booth. Lawson was already there, nursing a glass of whiskey. He stood as Ambrose approached, offering a short nod. Thanks for coming. Ambrose slid into the booth opposite him. Let's hear it, he said evenly, waving off the waiter's menu. I don't have all night. Lawson's shoulders tensed. Right. Look, I won't mince words. Ellington Defense is barely afloat. We need this contract to survive. If you can supply the gearboxes at a competitive price, we'll... Ambrose raised a hand. I know your predicament. I'm willing to cut a deal, but there'll be strict conditions. And I'm not guaranteeing it'll be cheap. Lawson swallowed, swirling his whiskey. I get that. But I'd like us to keep negotiations civil. For old time's sake. Ambrose's gaze hardened. Don't talk to me about old times, Lawson. You and Aveline made sure those were some of the worst memories of my life. A flicker of pain crossed Lawson's features. He set his glass down. I know. And I'm sorry, more than you believe. He exhaled, raking a hand through his styled hair. Things didn't work out with Aveline. She cheated on me too, repeatedly. Turns out she was never satisfied with anything or anyone. Ambrose's heart pounded. Though part of him felt grim satisfaction that Lawson got a taste of the betrayal, another part felt a strange pity. "So you're a victim now," he said, voice laced with cynicism. Lawson's jaw clenched. "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just stating facts. She left me in financial ruin, tarnished my reputation at the same time. And maybe I deserved it for what we did to you." His eyes dropped to the table. "But I've had to live with that every day." Silence stretched. Ambrose studied Lawson's slumped posture, the lines of stress around his eyes. He couldn't recall ever seeing Lawson so vulnerable. Finally, Ambrose spoke, tone subdued. "I won't lie. Hearing you suffer doesn't exactly break my heart, but I see you've been through hell, too." Lawson nodded, swallowing. "So can we at least try to put the past behind us? Work out a business arrangement that benefits both sides? I need your gearboxes. You need a major contract. We can salvage something here." Ambrose tapped his fingers on the table, thoughts drifting to Ophelia, her gentle presence, the promise of a brighter future. He recalled the vow he'd made to himself not to be consumed by vengeance. Am I truly letting go, or am I setting a trap? He wondered. He met Lawson's gaze. "I'll finalize a proposal. You won't get any freebies, though, and I need full disclosure on your client and your finances." Lawson gave a tight nod. "Understood. I'm prepared to show everything, sign NDAs, whatever it takes." They ordered dinner, though neither man ate much. The tension hovered despite the polite conversation. Eventually, talk shifted from business to personal. Lawson admitted the scope of his downfall ex-wives, plural, legal battles, rumored investigations into shady deals he'd tried to salvage. "I messed up big time," he said quietly. "Guess we both lost someone we thought we loved." Ambrose flashed on memories of Aveline's tear-streaked face, the day she confessed carrying another man's child, maybe Lawson's, maybe not. "Yeah," he said softly, swirling the water in his glass. "But maybe it was for the best. I've moved on to bigger things." "Good," Lawson murmured. "You deserve it." A trace of genuine respect laced his words. The server dropped off the check and Ambrose instinctively reached for it. Lawson half protested, then shrugged, letting Ambrose pay. They walked outside into a gust of cool night air. The city lights glowed overhead. "Thanks for hearing me out," Lawson said quietly, offering a tentative handshake. "Let's keep this professional from here." Ambrose accepted the handshake. "Professional," he echoed. "We'll set up a meeting at JS Components next week. Provide the docs I asked for." Lawson gave a weary nod and stepped toward his parked car. As Ambrose watched him go, a swirl of conflicting emotions churned in his chest, anger, pity, memories of heartbreak. Yet overshadowing it all was the image of Ophelia, a soft reminder that not everything had to revolve around rage or betrayal. Late afternoon light poured through the conference room windows at JS Components, casting sharp shadows on the polished table. Ambrose stood at the head, laptop open, a slide deck projected on the wall. Seated across from him were Lawson Ellington and a couple of his harried-looking associates. Tension all but crackled in the air. Ambrose flipped to the final slide. "So," he said, voice measured, "the MK6 gearboxes you requested use proprietary components originating from an American defense supplier. Under current export regulations, shipping them to Syria or any sanctioned country is illegal without a special waiver." Lawson's face blanched. One of his associates shuffled papers nervously. We weren't aware the final destination was fully sanctioned," the associate stammered, earning a glare from Lawson. Ambrose paused just long enough to let the implications sink in. He's trapped, Ambrose thought. Perfect. Then he continued. "If you push forward with the MK6, you'll be in violation of federal export laws. Fines, criminal penalties, potential blacklisting. It's quite serious." He let that hang in the air. Lawson swallowed hard. "You're telling me you can't fulfill the contract?" "Oh, I can," Ambrose replied, tapping a key. The projection flipped to a new slide. MK7 proprietary design, no American components. This updated version circumvents U.S. embargo restrictions by using purely domestically produced or non-American parts. It's fully compliant. But, he folded his arms, gaze cool. It's more expensive, a lot more. How much more? Lawson asked in a tight voice. Ambrose hit a button. An eye-popping figure appeared on screen, more than double their initial estimate. A near gasp escaped one of Lawson's men. Lawson himself just stared, jaw clenched. That's outrageous, he finally managed, leaning forward, knuckles white on the table edge. We can't possibly pay. Then your entire deal collapses, Ambrose said flatly. You miss your delivery schedule, face breach of contract lawsuits, possibly lose Ellington Defense altogether. Not to mention the legal trouble if you attempt to use the MK6 illegally. Silence stretched. Even the hum of the overhead projector felt thunderous. Ambrose maintained a calm exterior, though inside he felt a swirl of emotions, triumph, nerves, maybe a flicker of guilt. No, not guilt, he reminded himself. This is business and justice. Lawson exchanged glances with his associates. They murmured quietly, flipping through pages as though searching for a lifeline. Finally, Lawson looked up, face tight. I need time to review. Of course, Ambrose said, but not too long. Your manufacturing schedule is tight, right? Lawson exhaled. Yes. We'll get back to you within a few days. Later, after Lawson's team filed out, Ambrose lingered at the conference room window, watching them cross the parking lot. A knot of satisfaction coiled in his chest. You're cornered, he thought. Exactly where I want you. As he turned to shut off the projector, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from his assistant, Ethan. Hey, boss. Miss Rivers from Legal is here. She wants a quick word. Ambrose closed his eyes briefly, exhaling. Never a dull moment in corporate warfare. He stepped into the hallway, heading for his office. Along the corridor, JS Components engineers bustled, ignorant of the high-stakes drama unfolding upstairs. The hum of 3D printers and CNC machines offered a soothing backdrop. In his office, Miss Rivers, a sharp-eyed lawyer in her 40s, greeted him. I heard about the embargo twist, she said without preamble. Smart move, but we must ensure we remain squeaky clean. If Lawson tries anything shady, we'll be fine, Ambrose assured her, settling behind his desk. I've double-checked the compliance documents. The MK7 is fully legitimate. Worst-case scenario, Lawson tries to break the contract, but that'll just bury him further. He can't afford that, financially or legally. Miss, Rivers nodded, mouth curving in a faint smile. You seem quite motivated to see him in a bind. Ambrose met her gaze, flicking a glance at the stump of his missing finger, an old ache reminding him of the cost he'd paid in the past. Let's just say Lawson owes me. This time I'm holding all the cards. A midweek drizzle washed over the city streets, leaving slick reflections of neon signs on the pavement. Ambrose adjusted his coat collar against the damp chill as he left the JS Components building. He was about to unlock his car when a familiar voice, trembling and thin, called out from behind him. Ambrose, is that you? He turned, heart jolting at the sight of Aveline, standing under a small umbrella. She looked paler than he remembered, cheekbones more pronounced, hair not as immaculate. Her once expensive coat showed signs of wear, yet her eyes, those unmistakable hazel eyes, locked onto his with desperate intensity. He kept his voice calm, though shock rippled inside. Aveline. She took a shaky step forward. I've been trying to find you. I heard you became CEO here. Her gaze flicked to his left hand, the missing finger. She swallowed hard, guilt flickering across her face. So much has happened. Ambrose suppressed a surge of anger. Remember, you're not that wounded man anymore. He folded his arms. What do you want? She shifted under the umbrella, droplets spattering across her shoulders. Everything's fallen apart, she whispered. After I left Lawson, I made some bad decisions. My father cut me off. I'm broke, Ambrose. I have no one else to turn to? A cold, incredulous laugh almost escaped him. Of course. He remembered her tears that final night, the confession of pregnancy that might not have been his, the betrayal. And now you're here, seeking a lifeline? Aveline blinked, tears brimming. I know I have no right to ask, but please, I'm sorry for everything. I was young and foolish, chasing excitement, and I hurt you. Her voice cracked. I hurt both of us. His jaw clenched. Memories flooded in finding her half-naked with Lawson, her harsh words in court, the heartbreak that fueled him to become a mercenary. Focus on who you are now, he told himself. I've moved on, he said softly. I'm not the man you betrayed. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I can see that. You look stronger, successful. Her gaze darted to his watch, the expensive suit. I understand you hate me, but I'm desperate. Could you just help me get back on my feet? Alone, maybe? Silence stretched between them as the drizzle intensified. Ambrose glanced at her trembling form, recalling the time he truly loved her when they were happy in that small apartment, dreaming of a family. But that was another life. At last, he exhaled. I'm not giving you money, he said, voice steady. You chose your path. You left me with nothing. I rebuilt myself alone. She sobbed once, pressing a hand over her mouth. I see. I deserve this, I know. Ambrose looked away. Part of him felt a twinge of pity, but the scars ran deep. If you need real help, there are resources, charities, job programs, but not me. For a moment it seemed she might lash out, but her shoulders slumped, tears mingling with rainwater. I understand, she murmured. Can you forgive me, at least? He hesitated, feeling an odd calm settle in his chest. Yes, for my own sake. I forgive you, he finally said. But that doesn't change anything. We're done, Aveline. A tear rolled down her cheek. She gave a shaky nod, then turned away, her umbrella bobbing into the misty night. Ambrose watched her vanish into the haze. A hollow ache lingered, but also a strange sense of closure. I'm truly free now. A hush fell over the boardroom as Lawson Ellington re-entered JS Components. This time, his suit looked more rumpled, the circles beneath his eyes darker. Ambrose sat at the table's head, flanked by Miss Rivers from legal and a few financial advisors. The tension was palpable. Lawson cleared his throat. I've reviewed your MK7 proposal, he began, voice strained. The numbers are daunting, but Ellington Defense has no alternative if we want to fulfill the contract. We're willing to sign on your terms. Ambrose exchanged a quick glance with Miss Rivers. He took a breath. I'm sure you realize the cost implications. You'll be paying a premium, and we'll need partial payment up front to gear up production. Lawson nodded, jaw tight. We can manage it if the final product is delivered on time. Otherwise, we're sunk. Silence stretched. The faint hum of the overhead lights buzzed in Ambrose's ears. He drummed his fingers against the polished table. This is the moment. I can bleed him dry, break him. Yet something about Aveline's desperate face lingered in his mind, a reminder of how cyclical revenge could be. Slowly, he turned the open contract toward Miss Rivers. Let's finalize the details. However, he pinned Lawson with a level gaze. I'm willing to adjust the payment schedule slightly if you're prepared to consider a partnership arrangement. A joint venture, partial equity. That way, if this project succeeds, we both share the upside. Lawson blinked, surprise flickering across his face. You're offering me a lifeline? Ambrose kept his tone neutral. I'm offering us both a chance at a stable, long-term enterprise, not just a one-off transaction. He shrugged. But you'll sign a good chunk of Ellington Defense's equity over as collateral. A flurry of whispered debate erupted among Lawson's associates. Miss Rivers passed a note to Ambrose. Are you sure? Scrawled on it. Ambrose gave the faintest nod. Yes, this is bigger than personal vengeance now. Finally, Lawson exhaled, shoulders slumping. All right, we'll do it. Better a partnership than total ruin. A subdued but palpable sense of relief rippled through the room. Miss Rivers typed away at her laptop, adjusting contract clauses on the fly. Ambrose tapped the table. Let's make sure the new terms are transparent. They spent the next hour hammering out final details. Outside, afternoon sunlight bathed the parking lot, a stark contrast to the tension inside. When it was done, Lawson extended a slightly trembling hand. Thank you for not twisting the knife. Ambrose accepted the handshake, feeling the metaphorical weight of old grudges lift. "We move forward," he said quietly. "That's all." Once everyone departed, Ambrose walked Lawson to the building's lobby. Elevator doors dinged open and Lawson stepped inside. Just before they closed, he said in a hushed tone, "You've changed, Ambrose. For the better." Ambrose didn't reply, merely nodded. The doors slid shut, leaving him alone in the silent corridor. He released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Is this what letting go feels like? On his way back to his office, Miss Rivers stopped him, eyebrows raised. "That was generous. You could have destroyed him." Ambrose ran a hand over his chin, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "I've lived with hate long enough," he said softly. "Time to do something else." A crisp winter sun shone over the bustling Parisian airport as Ambrose stepped onto the arrivals concourse. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh pastries. He clutched a carry-on, heart thudding with anticipation. He'd come to this city at Ophelia's invitation, spurred by sporadic emails and calls they'd exchanged for months. Each message had reignited the warmth he'd discovered in her presence, something gentle and pure that cut through all the war-torn memories. He passed through a set of glass doors into the main lobby. Ophelia stood there, wearing a pale blue coat, hair gently swept back. The moment their eyes met, a radiant smile lit her face. She hurried forward, nearly dropping the flowers she held in her rush to hug him. "Ambrose!" she exclaimed, voice trembling with joy. They embraced, and for a heartbeat the bustling airport receded. He closed his eyes, inhaling her light floral scent, the softness of her hair against his cheek. Stepping back slightly, he took in her features no longer haunted by fear like in Africa. She looked healthy, hopeful. "You look incredible," he murmured. Her cheeks flushed. "And you," she teased, eyes flicking to his tailored coat. "You look every bit the successful businessman." He grinned, a faint trace of old scars in his expression. "I guess I do. But I'm still me, missing finger and all." Ophelia's gaze flickered to his hand, the lost ring finger now a faintly visible stump. She gently took his hand, pressing it between her palms. "I don't see scars," she whispered. "I see strength." They left the airport, a chilly breeze ruffling their coats. Ophelia led him to a waiting taxi, and they wound through the streets of Paris' old stone buildings, bright cafes. Ambrose marveled at how different it all felt from the harsh deserts and jungles of his past. A new beginning, he thought. Over lunch at a small bistro, they talked freely. She spoke of her father's recovery and her own volunteer work with a refugee organization. He recounted how JS Components thrived under his leadership, forging an unexpected partnership with Ellington Defense. She listened, eyes brimming with encouragement. "And Aveline?" she asked gently, sensing the final thread of his old wounds. "I saw her briefly," he admitted, stirring his espresso. "She's lost. I forgave her, but we're done. I don't carry that weight anymore." Ophelia reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I'm glad." That evening they strolled along the Seine River, the city's lights reflecting in the dark water. A hush seemed to envelop them, despite the occasional tourist boat passing by. Ambrose felt a nervous flutter in his chest, a sensation reminiscent of the first time he'd realized he might still be capable of love. They paused at a quiet spot along the embankment. Ophelia shivered slightly in the cold, and he draped an arm around her. "Ophelia," he began, voice thick with emotion. "I meant it when I said I'd find you once things settled. Things are settled now." She smiled, tears shining. "They are." Reaching into his pocket, Ambrose withdrew a small box. Ophelia's breath caught. Opening it revealed a simple ring silver, understated but meaningful. "I can't offer you perfection," he murmured. "I've seen too much, lost too much, but I want to share what I have left. Will you be with me?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling with joy. "Of course I will." She slipped the ring on, and in that moment Ambrose felt the last vestiges of his old pain dissolve into the cold Parisian air. They shared a quiet embrace, hearts beating in tandem. A few weeks later, Ambrose returned home, this time not alone. Ophelia accompanied him, eager to see his life in the States. They walked through the gleaming corridors of JS Components, the employees smiling curiously at the radiant woman by the CEO's side. He introduced her to Reynolds and Miss Rivers, who welcomed her warmly. At the factory floor, Ambrose paused, showing her the newly rolling production lines. "This is it," he said, exhaling contentedly. "Everything I fought for literally and figuratively." Ophelia nestled closer. "It's wonderful," she said softly. Ambrose glanced down at his left hand, the missing finger a reminder of what it took to get here. But he felt no bitterness, only gratitude. Every scar tells a story, he thought, and mine led me here, to you. Epilogue. A few days later, Ambrose and Ophelia walked the perimeter of the factory grounds, the sun casting long shadows. He paused by a blooming garden area, newly planted by staff. He squeezed her hand gently, feeling the cool metal of her ring. "From a broken soldier," he murmured, "to a mercenary, to a businessman, and now maybe just a man in love." She smiled, eyes warm. "Yes, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." He gazed across the lot where shipments of MK7 gearboxes awaited distribution, the symbol of his new empire and a testament to his trials. "All I've lost, all I've found," he reflected. Final lines. Ambrose pulled Ophelia into a gentle hug, the late afternoon sunshine lighting their faces. He recalled the day he first saw her, that Wharton bar, how she'd awakened something in him he thought was gone. Now, standing at the pinnacle of a life rebuilt, he whispered into her ear, "I thought I'd lost everything, but I realize now, the moment I met you, I had everything to gain." They parted, and in her smile he saw the promise of a future free from the ghosts of betrayal, violence, and regret.